What happens to us when we die? In these days of suit-yourself salad bar religion, of course, the rule is believe whatever floats your boat. So some people get all excited about maybe being reborn back into this world. And with typical Western culture optimism, they see this as kind of a second chance on life, you know? Maybe grab some of the stuff they missed the first time around. Maybe you'll even get really lucky and get reborn as Longfellow and get pampered 24/7. But the truth is that the religions where this idea of reincarnation comes from see another dose of life on earth as pure punishment. It's like when your math teacher takes your homework and throws it back at you and says, "This is bad, just do it over until you get it right." Not to mention, of course, there is the risk of coming back as a rabbit in coyote country. We don't talk about that. But what does happen when we die? The truth is, our beliefs about the afterlife are not random at all. They are closely tied to what we believe to be true about this life and how things work in this world. We see this in our story here today. The Sadducees and Jesus are having an argument. So let me tell you about Sadducees. They were kind of like the Kennedys and the Rockefellers and the Bushes, the sophisticated, upper crust, rich old families who pretty much ran everything. They ran the temple because the temple was not just a religious institution, it was a big money pit. It was the economic driver of that part of the world. It was just filthy rich and powerful. These Sadducees were so elite that normally they would just ignore a lowly little peasant like Jesus. But today, they pause just long enough to put him in his place. They tell this snotty little story to mock his belief in the resurrection, because they don't believe in the resurrection at all. They believe that when you die, it's game over. God rewards you only in this life, and all the good you're ever going to get, you're going to get right here. No heaven, no hell. Whoever dies with the most toys wins. Now here's the point. Their view of life gave them strong, self-interested reasons for believing this way. For one thing, the notion that God rewards you only in this life stroked their egos and fed their self-satisfaction. Look how prominent we are, you know. We must be God's besties. Second, it meant that they could simply go right on living the way they always had, enjoying the best, ordering people around, ignoring the plight of those less fortunate, and not have to worry about making any changes at all in the way they lived. And third, there was no ultimate accountability. After a lifetime of having everything their way, all they had to do was keep on getting away with it long enough that they could then die and stagger over life's finish line a winner. And nobody would ever call them to account for the way they had lived. At heart, their attitude was, yeah, it's a messy, ugly world sometimes, but it's a good enough world just the way it is. It certainly is never going to be different, but that's okay. In fact, it's the best of all possible worlds. So just accept things the way they are, learn the shady rules of the dirty game, go for the gold and be a winner, and impose those rules on the rest, relentlessly, and with cruelty if necessary. They are already plotting to kill Jesus. Let's be plain about that. They are already plotting as they speak to kill Jesus, because that's how they operate. But Jesus will have none of this. Jesus will have none of this. For one thing, think of where he grew up. He didn't grow up in a palace. He grew up in a humble village in an occupied country, and he knew firsthand that the world is not the way it should be. He knew good, hard-working men who got cheated and kicked to the curb. He knew faithful, pious families where death kept striking over and over again. He knew women like the one I met at a conference this last week. She went out to oil country to get a job because there were good jobs there. She needed to pay down some debts, and what happened is she had to keep fighting off people who tried to kidnap her. And the other guy that I met at this conference who came over to this country legally, he had his visa, but then he had been lured over by the promise of a really good job, and he got snared for years in slavery, working for a man who paid him nothing and terrorized him. Or the woman who grew up in poverty and was failed over and over again by child protective services. Jesus knows that this is God's good creation, that it really is, but it is far from being the way God wants it to be. There are dark powers at work twisting and corrupting it, destroying the lives of men and women God created in his image. These dark powers are always trying to take over the institutions that God set up to keep order and safeguard life. These dark powers are always trying to worm their way into our hearts and fill us with greed and fear and despair. These Sadducees are in the pay and in the operation of these dark powers, mocking the hope that God holds out to us and holding in contempt his Son. But God is stubborn. Whatever else God is stubborn. He is faithful to his good creation. He will never give up on what he has made. He will never surrender his world to the dark powers that want to turn it into hell on earth. And so he has declared war on them and sent his Son into the world to do battle against them. But such a strange battle. He does not use weapons of violence to kill his enemies. Instead, he comes to tell the truth, to expose the lies of those who want to smother hope or justify their crimes, to expose the greed of those who want to dominate for personal gain, to stand by the friendless and the powerless, to reveal the immense love and generosity and fairness and faithfulness of a God who created this world in love, to calm the fears of those who live in terror, to take into the body of his own Son the blows that are aimed at everyone who suffers, and to rise above those blows and to gain a victory and to share that victory with his children. And he has called us to join in the battle with him, so we never give in either, ever. He will in the end achieve his goal. He will complete this world that he has only begun. He will make it pure and beautiful. We don't know how, we don't know when, and it will not be we who do it. He will do it all by himself. But when he does, all those who have died before he got it done will be raised to live with God in a creation made new. Finally, a fit place where God can dwell with his children. And this is what the resurrection hope is. This is what the resurrection of the body is. A stubborn, loving God remains faithful to his creation, wins a victory in the end, and brings us into the world again to share it with him. And yes, we'll have bodies. Not like the ones we have now, but beautiful ones, perfected ones, fit to live in God's perfection. Because let's face it, these bodies give us a lot of trouble sometimes more than others, but they have a dignity to them. The body is not just a gum wrapper for the spirit that can be thrown away. Our bodies are integral parts of who we are. They locate us in time and space. I'm right here. You're over there. They keep us separate, but they allow us to be present to each other. Because being not the same, but present to each other is how love becomes possible. And the beautiful thing is our bodies will allow us to recognize one another in eternal life. So how do we know all this is true? How do we know that? Well, because God has already raised and glorified the body of his Son. Jesus is simply God proving that he can do it. He is the prototype of the new humanity, the beginning of the new creation. All we look forward to for ourselves is what he has already done to his Son. One day we shall be the way he is already. And meanwhile, we fight on to reveal the vision that God has for his beautiful world, no matter how hard the powers of darkness push back on us. Amen.